Good evening, everyone. Good Tvach. I'd like to welcome you all to tonight's Siyum on Seder Moed. Many of you, I'm sure, know that we have a daily Mishnah class that has been going on after Shacharis for the past 26 years. And we're on our second time around. A couple of years ago, we finished the entire Shisha Seder Mishnah. And now we're on our second cycle. And we have completed Seder Moed, which is the second section of Mishnah, which deals primarily with Shabbos and Yontif. Now, I want to begin first by saying that tonight's Siyum is dedicated in memory of all those who perished on October 7th, Shmini Atzeres this year, and the merit of our giving honor to Torah and rejoicing over the Torah and learning Torah tonight should be a merit for a refuah shalema for those who have been wounded, freedom for those who have been taken captive, and protection and success for the soldiers of Israel who are fighting to destroy our enemies. Because of that, the first thing I'd like to do is there are papers on your table. On the papers, they're double-sided. On one side of the paper are two chapters of Tehillim that we'll recite together, and the other side is the final Mishnah that we'll be learning together as part of the Siyum. So for the on the first page, which is two chapters of Tehillim, I'm going to ask everyone to please rise, and we'll say them responsibly, as we do every day in davening. Shira mala mala isasoina yale hari me'ayin yavo Ezri me'yimadoino yoisei shemayim va'aretz Al yitei lamoid raglecha al yonum shoymrecha Hinei lo yonum v'lo yishon shoymer Yisrael Adonai shoymerecha Adonai tzolcha al yad yeminecha Yemam hashemesh lo yakeka v'yareach b'layla Adonai yishmarcha mikol ra yishmar es nafshecha Adonai yishmar tzayischa v'yacha me'ata v'yad olam Shira malois makim krasicha Adonai Adonai shema v'koili tinazecha kashuvois l'kol tachanunai Im Adonai tishmar ya Adonai miyamai Ki mecha asalicha leman tivarei Ki visi Adonai ki vesad nafshi v'lidvaroi hoichalti Nafshi l'Adonai mishamim laboiker shoimrim laboiker Yachel Yisrael el Adonai Kim Adonai yachesed ve'harbe imoy fidus Hu yiftes Yisrael mikol avonoisal. Please be seated. I'd like to thank all those who are involved in helping to prepare tonight for tonight's Siyum Lav Malka. I'd like to thank the Rebbetzin, Danny Bani Betran, Cheryl Lamport, Colleen Michnick, Shoshana Michnick, and Stephen Sensinetti. I'd like to also thank the sponsors of tonight's Siyum, myself and the Rebbetzin, Danny Bani Betran, Jim and Colleen Michnick, Michael Nina Shapiro, anonymous, and Richard Liederman. I also want to point out and give some and point out the members of our daily Mishnah Shiur that are here today, and we have Dr. Dan Betran, we have Barry Steinberg, Richard Garcia, we have here Leo Silverman, Richard Liederman, Martin Pat, and present tonight, not here, Michael Shapiro. And as I say, we one of the things that we benefited from COVID, which is not an easy thing to say, but one of the things we benefited from it is the fact that once our shiurim went online, so the spread of the classes really grew. And we have people who regularly listen to the shiurim online. And I know that there are certain people that are regular listeners online of the shiurim. And I'd like to mention them: Jim Michnick, Arthur Raisin, Arthur Rubenstein, our friend Arthur Rubenstein. And again, any of you who are online right now listening to the Siyum, you know, this is all our simcha. It's our simcha together from the learning that we do on a regular basis every morning. So the final Masech, the final tractate, Masechta of Seder Moed is Chagiga. And the final Mishnah is on the second side of the handout that I gave you. And just some background, and that is that regarding the laws of Tum and Tahara, ritual purity and impurity, there was a rabbinic decree that people who were not well versed in the laws of Tum and Tahara, not well versed in the laws of purity and impurity, and therefore were not that careful with those laws, whatever they touched was considered rabbinically impure to people who were very careful and cautious when it came to making sure that everything that they ate, everything they were involved in, was in a state of tahara, was in a state of purity. And what's interesting is that there were certain times that this decree was suspended. So for instance, over Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, where everyone has to come to the Beis HaMikdash and have to be pure, so then everybody was pure. So then no matter who you were, whether you were what's called a chaver, a person who's careful with the laws of Tum Tahara, whether you're an Am Haaretz, not so learned, that typically what you touched you would make impure. When it came to Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, where everyone had to make themselves pure, the decree didn't apply. However, after Yontif was over, the same things that may not have been considered impure over Yontif were now considered impure after Yontif was over. And because of that, they had to be immersed in the mikveh. And one of those issues came up regarding the vessels of the Beis HaMikdash itself. Because during Pesach, Shavuos, and Sukkot, when everybody came up, if you were a Kohen, you were able to go inside the Heichal, you can go inside the Beis HaMikdash itself. And, when there's a lot of people around, people are touching and people are doing different things. And there were, believe it or not, there were Kohanim that were Amei Haaretz. There were Kohanim that were, again, typically not that careful about the laws of Tum and Tahara. But they came to the Beis HaMikdash also these 3 times in a year. And they would enter the inside of the Beis HaMikdash and they would touch things. So on Yontif itself, it wasn't considered impure. But after Yontif was over, it was considered impure and had to be toiveled. So they had to be immersed in the mikveh. So the Mishnah reads like this: Keitzad ma'avirin al taras hazara. How do they pass over all the vessels in order to make them pure? Matbilin es hakelim shayu b'mikdash. They used to immerse all the vessels that were inside the sanctuary. The oimer lahen, and the Kohanim would tell the other Kohanim that were not so learned, Hizaru shlotiga b'shulchan, that word menorah shouldn't be there. Hizaru shlotiga b'shulchan. Make sure you're careful not to touch the shulchan. One of the vessels of the Beis HaMikdash was the table, and upon this table, the golden table, there was the lechem upon him, the special breads that were there throughout from week to week. And the Kohanim would tell the Kohanim that were not so learned, don't touch the table. Why? I'm sorry. Be careful not to touch the shulchan, and therefore making it impure. Meaning, once Yontif would be over, they'd have to take the table and immerse it. And the table is never supposed to leave the Beis HaMikdash. There is a verse that teaches us the shulchan, the table, should always be there with the lechem upon him on it. And if they're going to touch it, it's going to be necessary now to remove it and have to toivel it. And therefore, the Amaratzim, those who are ignorant, who would now cause it to be impure after Yontif, were told, don't touch it. All the vessels in the Beis HaMikdash, yesh lehem shneim u'shlishim. They had seconds and thirds. They had replacements. During this time period when all these vessels had to be removed and had to be immersed in a mikveh, what would you do then? What happens now with no vessels there? The answer is there were always replacements. They always had spares, so to speak. They had second, they had thirds all year round in case something became impure. Because in case the first ones would become impure, the second ones would come in their place. All the vessels that were in the Beis HaMikdash, tunim tefillah, need to be immersed, except for the two altars. There was a golden altar and a copper altar. The copper altar was made out of wood and it was plated with copper. And these two altars, one was inside the heicha, the sanctuary, the golden altar, upon which the ktaris, the incense, was offered every day. And the mizbeach hanachoshes, the copper, which when they came to the Beis HaMikdash wasn't copper anymore, it was stone, but referring to the copper one that was in the desert, in the Mishkan, the tabernacle, that was the altar upon which all the animal sacrifices and the meal offerings, the menachas, were brought, the nesachim, the wine libations were brought. And we say that those two things, according to the first opinion of the Mishnah, everything needs immersion, chutz mimizbach hazav and mizbach hanachoshes. Other than these two altars, they did not need to be immersed, mipnei shein kekarka, because they're considered like the land. Land does not become impure, nor does anything connected to the land become impure. And therefore, even if the Amaretz touched it, it wouldn't affect it. And therefore, there was no need to have to immerse them in the mikveh. Divrei Rabbi Eliezer, these are the words of Rabbi Eliezer. The Chachamim say, Mipnei shehin mitzupin, because they are coated. Now, what that means is like this. According to the Chacham, according to the sages, we do not consider the altars like land. They're not considered like land. They're considered movable utensils. Now, the thing is, though, that as movable utensils, there is another law that if you have a wooden utensil that's not meant to be moved, it's meant to be stationary, it is not susceptible to impurity. So in essence, when we talk about the altars that were made out of wood, those altars, because they were stationary, shouldn't need to be immersed in the mikveh because they also aren't susceptible to any kind of impurity. But the sages said, no, they are susceptible. Why? Because they're coated. They're coated with metal. And since the metal coating as metal needs to be immersed, it is susceptible to impurity and needs to be immersed in the mikveh. So therefore, that makes it now that the entire altar is susceptible to impurity and it has to be immersed in the mikveh. So with this, now we have concluded our learning of Seder Moed, and now we'll say the Hadron. And one last thing before I say the Hadron, I forgot to mention, maybe some of you noticed the pictures on the table over there. This is not the first Malava Malka that we've made here in Shul for Seder Moed. Actually, over 20 years ago, maybe close to 22 years ago, we also completed Seder Moed, and we made a Siyum. It actually coincided with a winter seed reunion. We used to have the seed program with the yeshiva students who used to come, and they would come back in the winter for a weekend, for a Shabbos. And we would make a Malava Malka with them. So it coincided with both of them. And it was really a beautiful, it was one of our first, big events. In those days, everybody from Brighton used to come here when we did an event. And it was very exciting. People came, the Masifta came. It was a really, really beautiful occasion. And if you'd like to see some pictures, there are pictures on the table over there. You'll see some pictures of some of us who look a little bit different than we did 22 years ago. Now we look better, but but if you want to see, it's a little some nice nostalgia there. Okay, Hadron Allah Seder Moed, v'Hadron Allah, v'Hadrach Alon, Daitan Allah Seder Moed, v'Daitach Alon, l'Nistashim Minach Seder Moed, l'Sistashim Minan, l'Ba'ama Hadem, l'Ba'ama Da'asi. Hadron Allah Seder Moed, v'Hadrach Alon, Daitan Allah Seder Moed, v'Daitach Alon, l'Nistashim Minach Seder Moed, l'Nistashim Minan, l'Ba'ama Hadem, l'Ba'ama Da'asi. Hadron Allah Seder Moed, v'Hadrach Alon, Daitan Allah Seder Moed, v'Daitach Alon. Nistashim Minach Seder Moed, v'Nistashim Minan, l'Ba'ama Hadem, l'Ba'ama Da'asi. Harev Noah Adonai Eloheinu v'Stivas Seirascha B'finu B'fi Amacha Beis Yisrael. V'ni'anach li v'tzetzoeinu, v'tzetzoei Amacha Beis Yisrael, kolonu yedei Shemecha v'lemdei Seiresecha l'Shma. Vayvaytecha kamedim mitzvaysecha ki leilam hili. Libi samim b'chukecha l'man lo yevoish. Leilam le'eshkach pikodecha ki vam chiyasani. Baruch ato Adonai l'mnei chukecha. Amen, 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 sela v'ed. Vaydim anachnu l'fanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'la v'yiseinu. Shesamtach l'keinu v'yoshvei beis hamedrash. V'yisamtach l'keinu v'yoshvei karanas. She'anu mashkim v'hem mashkimim. Anu mashkim l'divrei serem v'hem mashkim l'dvarim b'telim. Anu amelim v'hem amelim. Anu amelim mekabim sachar v'hem amelim v'enim mekabim sachar. Anu ratzim v'hem ratzim. Anu ratzim l'chayim l'mabav v'hem ratzim l'be'er shachas. Shenemar. V'torah l'him taridem l'be'er shachas. An shedem remember l'echas l'yamei v'niyaf tachbach. Yiratzim l'fanecha Adonai Eloheinu v'la v'yiseinu. K'shem shezar tanu l'sayim Seder Moed. Kein tazreinu l'haskal sidorim acherim l'saymam. L'umed l'lamed mitoyach harachava lishmar l'atzus l'kemes kodivei sambatorasach v'yahava. U'zachus k'latanayim v'samidei chachamim v'nizkarim b'Seder Moed. V'chol asfarim shalamadnu. Yamad lanu zarenu zarenu shetama shatar akadosh mipinu. Pi zarenu v'zera zarenu. Meyata v'olam. V'kuyim banu mikra shakasuv. V'salecha chatancha esach v'shachbecha tishmar alecha. V'kitzai sehi sisichecha. V'yirbu yamech v'sipar l'cha shnois chayim. Orech mibina v'smer lo'isha v'chavoid. Adonai oiz amo yitain. Adonai yavarechas amoy v'ashalom. Please stand for Kaddish. I'd like to ask Richard Garcia to say the Kaddish.
Yikadal v'yikadash shemi rabba, v'alma dihu ati li'itchadata ulachata metaya ulasaka yadchon lechai alma umivnei karta d'Yerushalem ushlaklala hekala begava ulmiakar palchana nukraa minhara ulachatava palchana di shemaya liatre V'amlik kodesha b'richu v'malkute v'kareh v'chayechon v'yomechon uv'chaye dekobe Yisrael b'agalav v'zman kariv v'imru amen.
Amen. Yehei shmei Rabban
mivarach le'olam u'lamei almaya yitparak v'yishtabak v'yitpar v'yitoman v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitaleh v'yitalal shmei dekodesha b'richu le'ela min kol berchata v'shirata Tush bechata v'nechamata, damiran bi'alma v'imru amen.
Amen.
Al Yisrael v'al Rabbanan v'al Talmidion v'al kol Talmidei Talmidion v'al kol man de'askim be'oraita di v'yatra chadein v'di v'kol atar v'atar ye'elechon ulchon shlama rabba china v'chista v'rachamin v'chayin arichin umzonei rivichei u'forkanamin kodam avohon de'vishmaya v'yara v'imru amen.
Amen.
Yehei shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim tovim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Amen.
Oseh shalom b'imromav u'berachamav yaseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru amen.
Amen. Mazel tov, everyone. The live stream will return in a little while for our guest speaker.